implementation process. So you can think about this about like three things. You have the Ocl API, the Solr, which is an indexing tool, and data sources. So the way OCL works is by having multiple like crowdsourcing data sources. For right now, we have like three OpenMRS dictionaries for PIH, AMPATH, and the CL. The CL remains the de facto standard for OpenMRS implementation. Then we have reference terminologies like here, it's NOMAD, LOINC. And so the way I thought about this was to import them into two Solr cores, one called concepts and the other one OCL types. So this is my Solr. This is the way to get home. So you go to localhost colon 8983 Solr, then you just go to the admin. It's for sure the easiest way to get to home. And at this point, I'm using Solr 4.3, and you can, on my left hand side, you can see concepts and debug. And so all this, what they are is just the concept names. And if I come here to my home, so you can see I have a folder here. So my working directory is just like in the Solr example, Solr. And you can see I have debug and concepts. So if I rename, copy debug, and because you're copying a folder, we want to do copy -r debug into a folder called types. So if we do ls, we can see we have something called types. So if we go to this folder, we can see we have a readme which comes in, and then we have the config folder and the data, just because I've already indexed the data. So if you go to the config file, you have the most important thing is this, the config XML file, which gives, so if I show the XML file, let me just show it a bit better. You can see it starts with data configuration, and then document, and then you create an entity. So that's all that is needed. So these are actually available in the Ocl API folder. Let's move there. And so when you come to Solr, you can see types and concepts, which are just basically the two folders. I copied specifically the config file because that may, just to shorten the learning curve. So you can see this is my config file. You put in your passwords and your data sources, and then various types. So essentially the concepts core just holds concepts, and then OCL types holds all these other resources: collection, class, data type, mapping, map type, source, star, and user. And the way we've done this is we've added a field called type. So if I come here to my Solr core, and so let me change this debug to types. I was just using debug because I was working on it. So, and this is a good exercise just to show you how you can rename new cores. And this occurs in this Solr XML file. So if you do the Emacs Solr XML, you can see we have core name is concepts and core name is debug. So I can say core name is types. And close this. Use Control-C to close. To start up Solr on your command line, all you do is just pass in this command java -jar start.jar. And so let's wait. And it looks like my Solr was restarted successfully, so I can refresh this. and now you can see this becomes types. So when I come to type and I can query, I can, this filter query, I can say type is equals to class, and I want JSON returned for that. And so you can see it returns, 53 documents, which shows class. So because some of the core OpenMRS things share the same UUID, we have this document, the way we've started to generate a full ID just for, like, you can think about it as an OCL tracker, is to just add, the source, maybe like CL, then this is a class. So it could be CL data type, CL source, or something like that. And so you can see class, you can see type of collection, and so you can see basically collections are just collection, and you can see all the possible fields that are returned with that. You can see type of map type, and you can see this becomes a CL map type. Earlier on I'd shown you a CL class. So then this is an important step because it helps you debug most of the data. So that explains like the two cores. And on this link on Ocl API, when you come to Solar, the pushed in code, you'll be able to see that we have the concepts and the types, and then I've put in a Solar core, which just gives you like the basic outframe of the directory of the Solar core. Very well explained here. And because I had a problem with debugging and setting up this, so I've put in the lib, which must have the MySQL connector for you to import any MySQL databases for indexing. So this is pretty well what I've just summarized. It's written here on the wiki page. And so the next point is this element, which is the Ocl API. So the Ocl API is a Python application, very simple application. So most of the work went into the Solar and redesigning and reindexing the data. And just one more thing before we move away from Solar. So when you come to the core that you're looking at, so let's say Solar concepts, actually better, let's look at Solar types. So if you look at the config file, and the file to look for are two important files. You have the schema file. The schema file just basically carries all your fields. So remember, documents give you flexibility to add fields on the fly. So if next year we decide we want a field called Judy, we'll start it. But you just have to come and check that that field exists here. And if you want to add a new field, then you add it from this point. So that's the only thing to think about. And the other thing that you can read a bit more on Solar and indexing. The other thing that we will change is the data DB config. This is manually created. So I said like it lists all your databases and your data sources. So if you look at my like I'm maybe selecting all, entity name for called user. I'm selecting a data source called user. So this is just my SQL workbench. And you can see all my databases are here. So I have a database called test or Ampath concept dictionary, and that database comes here and picks in, MCL, OpenMRS 19 CL. And those are just the same databases. So that's how you modify that. So if you were to add a new source, that's all you just do. Just copy this, change the password, the user, and then the link for the database. And then from there, you just select all. So these field names should match to the field names in the schema. Yeah, so once you do that, you come here to types. If you're doing a full index, the place to import is the data import. You can do the full import. Mark that this will erase all your data, or you can do a delta import. And the idea is to select clean and commit so that it saves the data. And then you want your fields in the schema to be stored is equals to true. That value should be true so that they are saved in the database. They're not just indexed. Because once we index them, we no longer interact with the data sources again. And so you do that and then just execute, and it's gonna just upload the data for you. We won't do that right now. You can see this is just a configuration, and you can reload it. So you can run queries from the Solr, like I did, to check for the type is equals to collection, and you can change if you don't want to get XML. But to work with this, we're using something called Sunburn and Flask, and this just refers to our code. So if I can show you like a brief overview of our code. So basically what Flask does, so these are the imported libraries, and I'll do a new screencast for just setting up these libraries. And then, you set up your API route, and you set up your URL and the concept URL. And then you initiate the Flask app, by saying Flask is equals to app. If you're developing, I would suggest that when you come to run the app, you should set debug is equals to true so that you get like the error logs. But else, when you're in production, then debug, this should be empty. Like debug should be false. And that's how it should be running. Then, so the way this is organized, it's a bit hacky because one element of the Flask is not working, which is basically working with constructors. So we have more of functions running this. So you can think about it like if you look at our short API reference, quick reference versus version 0.1, we have like get is equals to source. So if you had a problem with that, all you'd need to do is come to the code and look for where source is. So we were looking for get is equals to source, and so you can also just get here, API is equals to source. And so you can see that on this method, we are able to do a get and a post. And so that's all Flask requires for you to map. You do the upload and then the methods, then define a function and say if, this method is this, then do some work. And basically for us, we want to just run the queries. And so this is an instantiated Sunburn query that just queries. So like the search all where the type is equals to source, and return a standard count and default count, and then execute that query, and then it returns an object. So by default, you're just supposed to pass an object, like, so you can say constructor is equals to Judy, in case you already have instantiated an object, but that has a bug right now, so we had to omit that approach. And so that's all that is simply required to get data. In case you're searching for Q, which is like a query, then we want to search on the name at that point. If you want to search count, so on count, then we change the default count to the account that is put in by the user. So those are some of the principles as you think about the code that we wrote. And yeah, so we'll do a new screencast to do something specific on the code, but basically that's the overview of the approach. So this is